Good evening, everyone. I'm calling to order the Commission on Police Practices regular business meeting for October 1st, 2024. It's 4:34 p.m. I'd like to welcome everyone. And let's move on to the roll call. Ms. Condi.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Not really? Little. Do you have my? Yeah? Okay. Oh, perfect. Okay. Chair Gloria Tran. Here. Thank you. First Vice Chair Dennis Brown. Here. Thank you. Second Vice Chair Doug Case. Commissioner Aguilar is not here yet. Commissioner Armentrout, I believe, is excused. Yes? Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Benitez, also excused. Commissioner Byer. Thank you. Commissioner Kansen is not here yet. Commissioner Chatsky. Thank you. Commissioner Diaz is not here yet. Commissioner Dockstader is not here yet. Okay. Thank you. She's excused. Commissioner Flores. Thank you. Commissioner Griffin-Jones, not here yet. Commissioner Harvey. Oh, thank you. Commissioner Hilbert. Thank you. Commissioner Honore. Thank you. Commissioner Justice. Thank you. Commissioner Lawton is running behind. He just called. Commissioner Molmat is.
She's running behind as well. She texted me.
Okay. In the parking lot. She's parked. Okay. She'll be here soon. Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Ortega. Thank you. Commissioner Robinson is also running behind. Commissioner Rocha Vasquez. Thank you. And Commissioner Rodriguez. Thank you. That concludes roll call.
Thank you, Ms. Condi. Okay, let's look at minutes. We have two meeting minutes to look at. Let's start with September 4th. Is there any changes, amended, suggested changes? Thank you. Commissioner Justice moves for approval. Is there a second? Commissioner Rodriguez seconds. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Let's move on to September 14th, which is the community hearing. Any amended recommendations? No? Again, Commissioner Justice, thank you. Again, Commissioner Rodriguez. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Both passed. Thank you very much. All right, let's look at non-agenda public comment. Mr. Paul Parker, our Executive Director.
Good evening, everyone. We have 0 requests to speak in person, and I believe we have 0 requests to speak online.
Thank you.
Actually, we do have 1 request to speak right now online. Just came through.
Okay.
John Doe. Bear with me here. Actually, now there are 2 requests to speak, and I'm having an issue getting them over. Ms. Condi, would you be,
I just allowed him to speak.
okay. John Doe.
You need to unmute.
John Doe, you need to unmute. John Doe, you need to unmute. Ms. Condi, is there a way that you can unmute Mr. Doe?
I just allowed this
Okay.
person to speak again.
John Doe, are you there? Hold on one second. Is there someone speaking?
He just muted himself.
Okay, John Doe, we're going to come back to you. Next, we'll go to Wayne Landon. Ms. Condi, would you mind? For some reason, I'm having a problem.
Yeah, I just allowed you to speak.
Wayne Landon.
Okay, I hope this is the appropriate place to state this, but what I was wondering is about on, like when they have emergency warnings, like on the TV and the helicopters, you know, it's just like we are really wondering what, you know, is being said, because the TV goes so quiet and you can't hear what they're warning you about. And
Mr. Landon, if you could hold on 1 second.
warn us about things.
Okay, Mr. Landon, if you can hear me, can you repeat maybe the last 10 seconds of your statement? We apologize for our technical difficulties. Mr. Landon, are you there?
He's unmuted.
Mr. Landon, are you there? Okay, let's put Mr. Landon on pause for a second, and let's try Mr. Doe again.
Mr. Landon, you can speak. Oh, no, sorry.
Mr. Doe. Mr. Doe.
Okay, sorry. John Doe, you can speak now?
Okay, what we're going to do as we try to work out whatever technical difficulties, if it's on our end or not, we're going to come back to Mr. Doe and Mr. Landon at a later time. Moving on, there are no other requests to
I
speak.
think,
Yeah, try Mr. Doe one more time.
I think it's an internal, I think they are speaking and we just probably can't hear.
Okay, we'll allow our audiovisual professionals to handle the situation. We'll come back at the appropriate time. With that, there are no further requests to speak online, and no one in person.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Please let us know when the technical difficulties are fixed so that we can come back to them. So we are going to move ahead. So let's go to the chair report. All right, the Cabinet and Executive Director met with San Diego Police Chief Scott Wall and his leadership team last Wednesday. Among the items discussed, the case that was voted on by the commission to take to the chief. We will have a report on that in closed session so that we can maintain confidentiality. We discussed the internal affairs responses when we send cases back. It appears they don't take our suggestions thoughtfully. They don't open discussion about it and respond curtly. IA took that seriously and said that if we disagree with their response, they are always open to discussing it. We also shared concerns about alleged comments by a San Diego Police Department officer at a community meeting. The officer allegedly told the group that the CPP is making, quote, radical recommendations that will hinder their police work. I should have unquoted, and radical recommendations, unquote, that will hinder their police work, and asked for community support to oppose the changes. The chief and the leadership team agreed that it was inappropriate and will address it. We are trying to find out more about that, but we have taken it to his level. We also updated the chief on the ad hoc committee's progress. So I want to update you on the ad hoc committee since we have a lot on our plate on this agenda. The information was provided by the committee chairs and committee members. For the Pursuits Ad Hoc Committee, the paralegals completed their analysis of CHP pursuit data. The committee will be seeking input from the department through the PD liaison, and they are working closely with our policy manager to work on the format so it's in the best possible format to finally vote on the ad hoc committee, then bring to the commission. Once that's approved, it goes to the chief. The Pretext Stops Ad Hoc Committee is finalizing their recommendations and have invited Andrea Guerrero, Executive Director of Alliance San Diego and statewide chair of the RIPA Board, to their next meeting to get her insight and feedback. And for the protest policy, at an upcoming meeting, the commission will incorporate community feedback from our community hearing to revise and approve a set of recommendations to update the SDPD's First Amendment activity facilitation procedure, which we colloquially, I didn't say that very well, call our protest policy. So thank you all, the chairs and the committee members, for all the time you have put into the work on those policies. I also, to reiterate, our policy manager, Mr. Aaron Burgess, is working closely with the ad hoc committees to guide them on the process and the recommendation. One item he's working on is to make sure the recommendations are in a more readable format, as well as keeping the format consistent for all the committees, so that when the police department finally gets it, they're used to the format and it's easy to read. So his experience and role is invaluable, and we thank him. Since forming our 3 standing committees, the training, the continuing education, the training and continuing education, that's one, community outreach and rules committee, the chairs have been proactive about working with staff to schedule their first meetings. We decided to wait until after the NACOL convention to give staff a chance to assign a staff member to work with each committee and help facilitate the meetings. As a reminder, the standing committees fall under the Brown Act, which means they must meet in person, give 24-hour notice, and post the agenda, as well as produce minutes. As a reminder, the next CPP meeting is on Wednesday, October 23rd. Is on Wednesday, October 23rd. Instead of the third Wednesday, as the cabinet and staff will be at the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement Conference during the third week of October. The October 23rd meeting will also be at this location. All right, that's it for now. Do we have our speakers or not yet?
We can try it again. Are we able to try it again?
I don't know, we're trying to try it. We'll see.
You want to try it again?
Let's try it again. Let's try to bring over Mr. Doe, if you could for me, please.
Okay, Mr. Doe, I'm going ahead to ask you to unmute. There you go. He's speaking. Sorry, Mr. Doe, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
His microphone's bouncing, so it's...
The microphone is unmuted.
Okay, we're going to move forward. We will come back to our non-agenda speakers when it's ready. Okay, so just give us a heads up. Mr. Parker, the Executive Director report.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's a lengthy report, so I'm going to try to be brief, and what I'll do is I will make this I'll send it out in an email tomorrow for all the details. I just want to cover a couple of main topics. Effective now, every commissioner for the CPP has access to the CPP offices, finally. So Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, you have access. Your badges should work to get you in there. We strongly encourage, if you're in the area, stop by, say hi. If you want to work from that area, if you want to do some work on it, I mean, we have extra cubicles for now until we get fully staffed. Please come in and make good use of the space. Mr. Burgess and I met with Jerry Threet earlier today. If you recall, Jerry Threet's doing an independent review of the 153 cases that had timed out from 2020 to 2023. He's putting the final touches on his draft report, and we're looking also to amend his contract. So the budgetary and the work product, we hope to have him ready to go by the mid-November, mid-December. Within that 1 month period of time, he should be able to make his presentation to this commission. Tomorrow, Mr. Bennett, outside counsel Mr. Bennett, and I will be meeting with the city's HR labor team to discuss their preliminary feedback to the 10 operating procedure drafts that you folks worked on diligently over the last 8 to 10 months, thereabouts. We're going to be meeting with them. They've already given us written feedback. We're going to get their verbal feedback and then move forward. I'll put everything in a nice package for the ad hoc committee that's in charge of those procedures. And then they'll be, I'm sure, bringing them back to the commission hopefully really soon so that we can move forward to get them ultimately through the process to get to the meet and confer with the Peace Officers Association. We don't anticipate that meet and confer process starting until at least January to set expectations, okay? And that's at the earliest. The interim SOPs, as you folks know, they allow for the CPP to publish a summary of each case review. They allow for that to be on our website and relate it to the complainants. Mr. Bennett and I are meeting to discuss how to do that immediately so that the work you folks are doing behind closed doors we can bring transparency to. Next Thursday, Staff and I are meeting with Internal Affairs staff to talk about complaint processing procedures. That's not been done. They do things one way, we do things another. They speak for us, we speak for them. We're going to try to get to the bottom of all that and make it a simple process so that we're making sure that we're doing the customer service the best way we can. As far as our retreat, or your retreat, I should say, Ms. Conde sent out a request, a poll last week. We've had responses from 10 people about a couple of dates in January. If you haven't responded to the poll, please do so. That'd be great. Training update. It's basically not any different than what it was last month. And then with the standing committee, I'll provide more information in an email about that. Ms. Abed is still getting me into the community, met with yet another group last week, and I have another one for next week. We're looking at budget, we're looking at staffing. Again, I come to you every month and say Deputy Executive Director, General Counsel, Performance Auditor. We believe finally, we've had some turnovers in HR with personnel, whatever, that we'll be able to get those posted, hopefully as early as this week. I keep saying it, but hopefully as early as this week. And then finally, just so everyone's aware, upcoming CPP dates for November, November 6th and 20th, and then December 4th and 11th. Locations to be determined. That's the extent right now of my executive director report. I'll send out everything tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Just a reminder to add on, when Mr. Parker was talking about polls, if you're called about meeting dates and you say you can't make it, please don't forget to email myself and Mr. Parker for excused absences. If, for example, you're out of town or you know you have a work commitment, we want to excuse all the absences. So please email us prior to noon of that day. The reason we ask for noon, and that's in our bylaws, is because if for some reason we don't have a quorum, we do not want to have AV and staff come set up and we can't meet. So that's the reasoning for the noon deadline, okay? So thank you, Mr. Parker. Moving on to the community hearings until I get an okay that we have our speakers. All right, so as you may recall, the CPP voted to have community hearings on 3 more policies, which is the 4th waiver, Special Operations Unit, and de-escalation by the end of the year. Due to the fact that we added the protest policy and the pursuit policy into the mix because they were timely, honestly, there just isn't time to hold those meetings, especially with the holidays coming up. So, having said that, I'm going to ask at some point, after we discuss it, for a vote to extend that deadline to have those community hearings so we can do a good job with the policies we're reviewing right now. So do we have any public comment on this item, Mr. Parker?
Quite frankly, it's kind of difficult to say because we still have hands raised from before. So I'm going to say, even if we do, we'll come back to them when we're told that the situations have been resolved. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any discussion about that?
My apologies.
I'm sorry?
Someone virtually said that there's no audio, they can't hear.
Okay.
Just so you know, they can't hear us on here.
All right. We need to pause, I'm being told. Hang on, Commissioner Hilbert. Okay. I know. This is frustrating. I'm being told by our legal advisor that we need to pause until we get the audio back up. Ms. Conde, can they hear yet?
Here,
If
let
it
me-
takes too long, we will continue, but out of courtesy, we were going to pause quickly.
I'll ask.
Can you dial into it somewhere else and listen?
Oops. Yeah, I can call in.
What happened? It just like all of a sudden went away.
You want to try calling? To call in?
Yes, I thought it was on.
Are we almost there?
They're not, so they're not responding to this, so I'm gonna call in and see if I can hear it myself.
Thank you.
There is audio? You can hear it? Okay. Okay.
Did we hear that they can hear? Thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead. So we had
It's okay.
Mr. Hilpert, excuse me, Commissioner Hilpert.
So I know we've added a lot to this, and I think we've done a lot as a commission in general. The one thing I would suggest is we, as a commission, kind of vote to prioritize the topics. So the ones we feel are the most important, we can prioritize those and have those first. I would propose potentially having the Special Operations Unit as the first one we look at, possibly followed by the fourth waiver, and then de-escalation would be my suggestions for the commission to discuss and prioritize. I was going to say Special Operations Unit first, fourth waiver second, de-escalation third.
Any other discussion? All right, we do have one public comment on this item. Mr. Parker?
I'd like to call Francine Maxwell. Ms. Maxwell. Two minutes.
Can we get her a hard copy or a hard-wired mic, please? It's not counting. Brandon, you could make the motion, too. June 30th. I mean, that's realistic. Erin, why can't I see your face? That look. That will never be forgotten. What did he say?
Francine,
He did teach me that.
Francine Maxwell. I can't hear myself.
Yes.
You can hear me? Good.
Yes,
I
thank
can't
you.
hear me. I normally can hear me. Francine Maxwell, Southeastern San Diego resident. Want to make sure that it's noted that the community education piece is so important that I would hope that you would partner with the Chief of Probation. Tamika Nelson needs to be invited and bring her team when you want to talk about fourth waivers. I believe in voices. Every word that they speak as a community is important, but to bring the people to lay the foundation, because people know what they know when they sign that paperwork on probation. They know who's supposed to be in their car. They know who's not supposed to be in their car. They know where they're supposed to drive. So if we can mitigate all of that and we just get to facts, I respect people's feelings, but we got to lay the foundation for facts. And so I'm asking you to please have somebody from Tamika Nelson's office, the Chief of Probation. I'm asking you to reach out to our District Attorney, Summer Steffen, when it comes to de-escalation, because she paid the region to learn how to do de-escalation out of her budget. So it's very important that you learn the foundation and the history that we have here in San Diego. I believe in people coming and telling you their story, but I need you to really re-educate the community at the beginning of your importance of what we've gone through. We didn't go through willy-nilly. Summer wrote a big check. Okay, so I want to make sure that Summer is invited, and if Summer is busy and out of town nationally, invite Dwayne Woodley. A lot of people don't know who Summer's right hand is, and Dwayne Woodley needs to be invited. So, and as far as Special Operations Unit, we have new people that are over the special operation. Make sure that the police department provides this group with the new org chart so that you know the commanders and the community knows the commanders, because the community don't know all of our commanders. So I just want you to reach further out when it's time for you to do what you do. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Maxwell. We have no other requests to speak in person, and until the AV situation is resolved, we'll move on.
Thank you. Those were excellent recommendations. All right, any more discussion? Commissioner Flores.
So I was just trying to get clarification on a couple things. With the fourth waiver, is that more in line with our pretext stop policy recommendations too? Should that be something that we consider? If we're pushing that back, then we should push back deadlines on those recommendations if we're going to consider feedback from the community, as well as other recommendations with not just fourth waiver, but special operations, anything to do with people that are targeted, or anything to do with these situations that happen that are pretext, and all the systems that are in place to escalate that.
While that's a good recommendation, the policies overlap, but I think if we look at them separately, we will be able to get clarity on specifics. For example, there is a pretext policy, and it does overlap with fourth waiver. So I think we're going to go ahead and move forward with these, and then we can look fresh on the other ones and kind of weave them together if need be. Thank you. Any other discussion points? Okay, do we have a motion? Okay, Commissioner Hilpert.
I would make a motion that we delay these 3 community hearings until, I guess we'll do the end of the fiscal year, say June of
30, that would-
25.
In my opinion, that would be the most realistic.
Because I think it gives us time to get everything done. So I'd make a motion to extend that deadline to June 30th, 25, and I'd put it in the priority of special operations, fourth waiver, and de-escalation.
Is there a second? Commissioner Rodriguez seconds. Any more discussion? Commissioner Honore.
Oh, it is? Okay, there you go. Do we currently have a calendar of what other public forums will take place between now and the end of the fiscal year? It seems like a long time, 9 more months before we go back to these. Our calendar is full with all the rest of the activity we want to do?
With the holidays coming up, our retreat hopefully in January, then we can maybe do our first one in February. The executive director and the captain will sit down and look at a calendar, and then we'll present it to the commission and see if they're good with that. But as you saw, what it takes to review a policy, from having the community hearing, publicizing it, having an ad hoc committee, working with the policy advisor or manager now that we have one. So it takes a bit, and we want to do it well. So if we do, 3 within the first 6 months, that's 2 a month. Does that work? Commissioner Rodriguez. They may not be ad hoc at the time. We might have a standing policy committee, so we're working on that as well. But we can work on that. What do you mean? Give me a little bit more. That's something we can absolutely talk about. That sounds interesting. Okay. We'll get more on that and see if that's a possibility, because then we'd have a jump on it, actually. Nice. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Is there a second? Oh, I'm sorry. You already seconded. My apologies. All right. All those in favor of delaying the the community hearings, starting with Special Operations Unit, fourth waiver, and then de-escalation, please raise your hand. Opposed? Okay, two opposed. Did you get that? Okay. Any abstentions? Thank you. Do we have our public comments yet? Okay, we're going to try.
You want to try, Ms. Condi? You want to do, want to go to John Doe?
Yeah. Sorry.
John Doe.
You can unmute yourself. It's not responding.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay.
We'll come back.
Do you want to do Wayne well, this person specifically didn't unmute, but.
You
do
can
want to-
try.
Wayne Landon?
Wayne Landon, are you there? Here's what we'd like to do. Until we get the audiovisual situation resolved, we'd ask the folks requesting to speak on any item right now, just put the comment into the comment. You can add it to the chat. We will make sure we note it accordingly and attach it and we'll read it into the record, and it'll be attached to the minutes next month. We apologize, obviously, for this inconvenience. And also, if you'd like to submit further comments, you can always go to our website and email us, and we can make sure that those are attached to the minutes as well. Thank you.
They're saying no legible.
Okay, so we've been requested to do commissioner comments earlier on before the closed hearing, the closed session, because that way the community can share in what we're thinking. So I have allotted about 10 minutes for commissioner comments. So I will have one after other people speak. Is there anyone who would like to share a commissioner comment?
So I attended the funeral for Officer Austin McIntyre. It was held at the Shadow Mountain Church out in El Cajon. So it's a very large church, and it was like standing room only. So I was looking for a seat, and one of the police officers came up and said, "What group are you with?" So I said, "The Commission on Police Practices." And he says, "Oh, put him down in the VIP section." And I also gave 3 community presentations regarding the commission. One was with our automotive shop owners group at a regular monthly meeting. And another one was with the Logan Heights Community Development Corporation, the small business group. And then the most recent one was with the Central Division Captains meeting. They were taking notes.
That's excellent. Thank you for getting out in the community. Do we have any other commissioner comments? All right, I have one that was given to me from our former commissioner, Mendoza, who, as you know, got a fantastic opportunity to have a fellowship in Sacramento. So we had not had time to present his recommendation to see if there's consensus to put it on the agenda. So I promised him that I would bring it out and see if there's consensus. So he brought up the point that he would like to, and he has the presentation already, if you guys agree to put it on the agenda for another meeting. So basically sending commendation letters to police officers who we see are doing a really good job to see if it can go. So that part of our mission is to be unbiased, balanced, to see everything as impartially as possible. And there are times that officers, many times when they do a very good job, and a commendation from the Commission on Police Practices. In his recommendation, he has specific qualifications for when we would send a letter if we decided to. All I'm asking for today is if there's a consensus to hear more from what he presented, and he said he would join us via Zoom as just a member of the public, since he did send his letter of resignation. So is there a consensus to just put this on the agenda, not to do it? And we don't need a vote, but per our counsel, he would like a consensus if we're interested in hearing more. I could just look around at head shakes or nods or thumbs up. Okay, it will be on a future agenda. Danny, if you're watching, I can't promise it's going to be on October 23rd because we're getting close to some policy recommendations, but I will let you know when it is. So that is my commissioner comment in lieu of Commissioner Mendoza, former Commissioner Mendoza. Anything else? Commissioner Chatsky.
I'm not sure if this is the time or place, but there is, I would like to see the commission investigate possibly having a library at its offices and an online library for members when they're investigating cases. One thing I would like to see in the library is Bell's Compendium. Bell's Compendium is a compilation in brief format of the legality or illegality of search and seizure, bugging, and other Fourth Amendment types of issues, as seen from the U.S. Supreme Court, the Ninth Circuit, and California jurisprudence. It makes it very easy. It's crystal clear. If you go online now, he'll give you a little taste of the types of things that are said. So in one paragraph, you can see is, does this detention seem too long under established rules for the officer to go back to the car and do this kind of checking? What's too much? What's fine? And it would really help in terms of bringing us up to speed on various aspects of search and seizure law. And each subscription to it is $170 a year. I'm not sure if there are group subscriptions or not.
I see Executive Director Parker furiously taking notes, and that is something that's in his purview. It's not a vote that we need to take by the commission. He will look at the budget. So if you have more information, feel free to email it to him, and that is something that the staff can definitely investigate. Thank you, Commissioner Chatsky. Anybody else? Okay, so then we move on to a review of discrimination complaints and pretext stops. I turn it over to Executive Director Parker to introduce our outstanding outside counsel, Mr. Dwayne Bennett.
Thank you, Chair Tran. What I'd like to do is real quickly just give a real brief overview before I kick it over to Mr. Bennett. As we all know, on August 7th, this commission had its pretext meeting in the community. You heard from numerous community members who verbalized their concerns with pretext stops and racially discriminatory practices. Traditionally, just from a civilian oversight perspective, the motivations behind pretext stops are difficult to prove, and the allegations of discrimination are difficult to thoroughly investigate, to review, or to evaluate, absent obviously a racial slur or a like comment. For example, in Southern California, and when I was in another position in this county doing the same job, I learned that only 2% of racial discrimination allegations are sustained by any law enforcement agency that over a 5-year period in Southern California. So we're bringing this today. We're not going to discuss what was talked about in closed session, but today we want to address some issues. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bennett. How does this commission best evaluate and investigate these type of allegations? Is gut feeling appropriate, or is it a preponderance of evidence? Are these allegations investigated differently than other types of allegations, whether they be use of force or whatnot, especially as it pertains to whether or not there's an obvious policy recommendation or not? What should this commission be doing? How can you commissioners have meaningful and productive conversations about the allegations and circumstances of the incidents? How can this very diverse commission ensure that all members, regardless of race, lived experiences, and whatnot, can contribute to the conversation? Are the opinions of those without those experiences valued, meaningful, and contributory to productive conversation, with the goal of accurately assessing the allegations and rendering a finding supported by preponderance of evidence? That's the background. That's why we're here today. That's what we'd like to talk about. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Bennett.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Parker. Commissioners, obviously this is a difficult subject. I took a stab at writing to you and trying to memorialize my thoughts. And I told the chair and I told Mr. Parker, I said, I don't know that I can put this into writing in terms of the approach, or whether or not it'll be understood, or whether or not it'll be helpful to commissioners. But I took a stab at it, and you see the product that is attached to your agenda. It's a difficult subject. But it's a subject that you have to have, because a lot of the complaints you see are discrimination complaints. And very rarely do you or does the department sustain them. Now, we had the pretext meeting, and we looked at overwhelming statistics that show disproportionate stops of black and brown people. Some of those stops you all see because they come before you in complaints. So we don't know but that the complaints of discrimination that you see are some of those same pretext statistics that you saw that disproportionately went against black and brown people. Yet and still, those complaints are never sustained, hardly ever sustained. While we know that there's empirical evidence that something is wrong, because we heard it from the top of the police department, the chief of police came before you and admitted it and said that there's something organically wrong. These statistics do not look right for this community, and he's going to do something about it. Well, what then is your role when you see these cases? It's not, it's not that simple, and I see commissioners struggle with this issue. Part of the struggle, commissioners, honestly, before you, is that you have to be honest with yourselves. You can't be afraid to have very, very difficult conversations about discrimination and prejudice and how it applies in this context. And if you are looking for the officer or an officer to come up and racially search somebody before you're willing to say that was discrimination, you might as well shut down your work and just pass all these cases by, because no officer is that stupid. Or very rarely do you find any that will do that. You have to look at these cases difficult in a very, very comprehensive, in a totality of the circumstances manner. And just so I can explain totality of the circumstances, when I do sexual harassment training, I'm just going to give you this illustration, and maybe this will make sense. If you had a workplace that said that every day, now I'm making this up, right? I'm just going to make it up. But if you had a workplace that said that every employee must compliment another employee every day, just assume that's a policy. All right, let's just look at it from the policy standpoint. Say that's the policy of the workplace. Well, you go in and you look at somebody and you say, you look nice today. Okay, would anybody think that's sexual harassment? Would anybody be offended by that? Probably not, right? You look nice today. Most of the times, most people would look at that and say, oh, it's no problem, that's not sexual harassment. But say you come in and you say the very same words. You look nice today. Okay, very same words, but there's a different inflection. Now we're looking at totality of the circumstances. So now we have the words and the inflection. Now say, for example, I go up to you and say, you look nice today. Okay, now we have the same verbiage. We have inflection, and we have you looking the person up and down. Now, let's add one other factor. Same verbiage. You look nice today. And when I do that, I block your movement. Okay, what are the totality of the circumstances tests that we use to see whether or not there's sexual harassment? We look at the verbiage. We look at the inflection. We look at the up and down leering. We look at the block movement. Now, if you think about it, if you're just looking at the policy per se, you must compliment somebody. Okay. In theory, the person complied with the policy, but they also added in additional factors which makes you believe there is something unusual about that conduct, and there is an inappropriateness about it. And this is how you analyze sexual harassment cases and discrimination cases, and this is how you analyze police cases, commissioners. So if you're looking at these discrimination complaints from a strict policy standpoint only, and if that's the end of your inquiry, officer complied with policy, couldn't be any discrimination, you missed it. Because the totality of the circumstances means that you look at everything. Number one, why are these officers stopping people in the first place? That's the most critical inquiry. Is it the type of car that the person drove? Is it that those people drive those types of lowriders? Is that what attracted your attention? If it was the tinted windows that attracted your attention, why did that car's tinted windows attract your attention? Why not the Mercedes? Why not the car I drive? What about all these BMWs or all these Rolls Royces, all these Bentleys that have tinted windows that never get stopped? Why don't we stop those? You don't know who's behind the Rolls Royce. All the windows are tinted. They never get stopped. But why is it that the lowrider gets stopped? Who drives the lowrider? Who drives the Impala with the shiny chrome wheels? All right, that's a factor. That's a factor. Did the officer display an inordinate use of force? Why, officer, are you stopping me for a speeding ticket and reaching for your gun or holding onto your gun? That's a factor. That's a part of the totality of the factors attitude. Commissioner, you're discourteous. If you're discourteous to the person, that's another factor. You put that into the equation. You look at all the factors to see whether or not there is what you perceive or what you believe to be discriminatory. But you do not, commissioners, you can't stop with the fact that, yeah, you know what, the person was speeding. Yeah, the person had a tail light, couldn't be discrimination there. No, it still could be discriminatory. And unless the commission is willing to really, really grapple with that difficult work, and it is difficult, commissioners, I do not simplify it. And it's difficult. Every time I have this type of discussion with people, I feel a little jaded because I'm black. And people assume that I'm going to say a certain thing or I'm going to feel a certain way. And I do have different experiences than everybody here. Some of us have shared experiences, but we're all different. And we bring all those experiences to bear in terms of how we review these cases. And nobody's opinion is worth less than mine. Everybody's value. It doesn't matter if you're a white male, if you're a white female, if you're brown, if you're yellow. It doesn't matter. Everybody has an experience that you bring to bear when you do this work. But in order to do it, it's going to mean that you're going to have to look at the totality of the circumstances and recognize that there is discrimination out there. Not all pretext stops represent people of color. Not every time a black person, a brown person is stopped, that's not a pretext. Number one, pretext stops are legal, right? We know that. But are profiled and discriminatory pretext stops legal? That becomes the problem. And our courts have said that unless officers carefully articulate specific bases and reasons for stopping people of color in particular, those stops are suspect. So when you look at these discrimination cases, start with the fact, why was this person stopped? What was it about this person? Wasn't that unusual? And commissioners, you, not even necessarily you per se, but I've sat here as outside counsel for almost 3 years, 2.5, 3 years, and I've seen cases where African Americans in fancy cars were stopped for some reason. The police officer went over to that person and stopped that person, and there was no harm, no foul there. Or where a black man is talking to a white woman, and that somehow that alerts the attention of the police officer, and we escalate, and the situation becomes really, really interesting, and that's unfounded or not sustained, et cetera, et cetera. I don't claim to be that smart, but I know stereotypes when I see them. And all of you do also. And so I think that, if you're looking for a bright line test, because I was talking, when I sent the memo to the chair said, well, I wish there was a bright line test. And I wish there was, Commissioner, there's not one. For us, for we lawyers, we look for the black and white. Okay, give us the black and white. We deal in black and white, letter of the law. Tell us what it is. Tell us what it is. There's no black and white for this, Commissioners. You're going to have to look at the totality of the circumstances, and you're going to have to be willing to dive into the facts and look beyond whether or not an officer complied with policy to see whether or not discrimination existed. It's a funny thing. I was a part of the Rodney King case. Now, if you all remember, the Rodney King case was the George Floyd case of the 19th century. And when we went into that case and looked at it, what you saw was a black motorist who fled from police. And you know that when they stopped Rodney King, they stopped him pursuant to policy. It was within policy for them to stop him, but not to beat him like they did. Now, if we're going to stop with policy, hey, no harm, no foul. When that case went to trial in Simi Valley, the jury said, no harm, no foul. Hey, we're all good here. These guys didn't do anything. But when the federal government got a hold of it and looked at the case from the standpoint of the federal civil rights statute, they said race was an animus. This was a deprivation of his Fourth Amendment rights, even though the same state jury who looked at the same facts said no harm, no foul, these guys are good to go. From a legal standpoint. The totality of the circumstances factored in. And you know what else? I'll tell you this. Let's just bring it a little bit closer to home. George Floyd, If you followed the Derek Chauvin case, the officer who kneeled on his neck for 9 minutes and 46 seconds, do you know he was following policy? That hold, that knee to the neck, that was within policy for the Minneapolis Police Department, but anybody, including a child, knew that when that man cried for his mother, urinated on himself and said, "I couldn't breathe," they knew that they were looking at discrimination. A 7-year-old child could tell that that was wrong and that was discriminatory. But you know what? When he went to trial, his attorney said, my client complied with the department's policy and was just doing what he was trained to do. But it was also discriminatory, Commissioner. And so when you look at these cases, what I'm saying, I'm not saying anything that's happening in this department is that bad. And I do not subscribe to the notion that the San Diego Police Department is a racist police department. All right, I know people believe that. I don't believe it, because for it to be a racist police department, that means that you have a categorical castigation of people from the top to the bottom. I don't see it. But you know what? There are incidents. There are people. And not every officer has the right motives. You can't get behind that officer and see whether or not that officer has a biased motive in that officer's mind unless they come out and tell you, I don't like black people. I don't like brown people. I don't like yellow people. I don't like white people. Unless they do that, you won't know. You're going to have to look at the totality of the circumstances to try to ascertain that. So I don't know if I've made any sense at all here, Commissioners. I did the best I could to draft a memo for you to look at how we look at these cases, and I share my experience as a police legal advisor for five different police departments and practiced for over 40 years, and as an arbitrator who actually looks at these cases and decides these cases on behalf of departments throughout Southern California. So I hope it makes sense. Please feel free to ask questions. And Commissioners, here's the thing. If I can impress upon you anything, because I've heard some of your struggles. And I've heard commissioners say, you know what, I know this is not right. I know there's a problem, but the officer complied with policy. I've got to go along with it. That's where I disagree with you. That's why I totally disagree with you, because I don't believe you have to. But I do believe, Commissioners, that you, those of you, everybody on the commission, you have a voice. You need to let it be heard. Please, don't fear retribution. If you disagree with somebody who says, I think it's prejudice or discrimination, you need to say it. If you agree that there is prejudice and discrimination, despite what everybody's saying, you need to say it. Because everybody's voice is important. Until you really, really, tie into that and lean into that difficult work, we'll never understand it. So that's my 2 cents.
Before we take Commissioner discussion, we have to go to public comment. Mr. Parker?
We have one request to speak in person. Francine Maxwell.
Francine Maxwell, we know that San Diego is Mississippi by the water. We know that our ancestors know what to do to make it. I stand before you with a picture of black officers on a white man's social media dressed up in KKK because some black officers got a promotion. This is my city, native San Diegan. So for someone to stand before you and say that there's no racial overtones, it doesn't matter who's at the top. When the cancer is not cut out, radiation does not work sometimes. So we have entrusted you to not take us backwards to our CRB days, bring us forward to our CPP days, and please understand, trust and believe, mothers, grandmothers are still having the same conversation that our ancestors had. Stand there and say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and make it home. We want our officers to make it home safely, absolutely. But we also want our children to make it home safely. We have some rogue and reckless officers, and many of my community members have not acclimated to writing. And that's why I ask you to continue to come out in the community. I could ask you to train our community to write complaints because they don't understand that we need a paper trail so that you can get the officer out. You are going to work in conjunction with our new chief, his new organizational chart, but please understand that we are not trying to go backwards. We want to move forward in a truthful, honest dialogue. And if you don't pick up social media, make your executive director watch some social media interaction. Watch the bike patrol that is downtown and the extra aggression that is being shown to my neighbors when they go downtown in their city in the gas lamp. As I shared with you a few minutes ago, Summer Stephan spent a lot of money on de-escalation. Black and browns don't get to participate that much in de-escalation. But we have to re-educate each other. This is how you talk to an officer. This is how you film. Officers know the law and how to be filmed, so please make sure that we're pushing education.
Thank you, Ms. Maxwell. And I can tell you that, to comment on that real quickly, the executive director, well, not the third person, I and staff, we monitor social media. We need the complaints. Once the complaints come, we move forward. But we do keep an eye on what's going on. We try to keep, to get in the community as best as possible. We'll continue to do that with Ms. Abed. With that, I'll turn it back over to Chair Tran.
All right, Second Vice Chair Case has a comment and a question.
Yeah, my question is that our job is to evaluate the IA investigation until we can do our own investigations. And the difficulty we face is that when it comes to discrimination investigations, their investigation is at best often superficial. And when we ask them to ask the subject officers to articulate the rationale for stops, the response we get from the department is, well, the stop was legal, so we're not going to ask that question. And so then it becomes very difficult. And so my question is, what advice do you have for us when the department doesn't do a thorough investigation and doesn't give us enough information to make an informed decision?
So my advice is, ain't good enough. You know, if the department's response is, oh, well, we don't know, or the officer didn't tell us exactly why, well then why, I think that's where the discriminatory animus hides a lot of times. And if the commission, you know, the commission can do a lot of different things. The commission can just pass those cases by and say, okay, the officer didn't tell us, and you have a discrimination complaint. You're not doing the public any justice, commissioners, by saying, you know what, we don't know exactly what the basis was, they didn't tell us, so therefore we're gonna go along with whatever their not sustained or unfounded findings are. I don't know what to tell you, commissioners. Look, in my opinion, commissioners, I know you're all gonna think I'm crazy for saying this. To confirm the department in error is the worst thing you can do. If there is discrimination out there and you are saying, well, you know what, they didn't give us enough information, we don't have enough information to make this call, and if it's a discrimination complaint and it's unfounded or it's not sustained, but you don't have the particular information to know why that person was stopped in the first place, there could be a valid discrimination complaint there. I understand the fact that you don't have the information to make that determination, but why then would the commission then rubber stamp it? Because that's exactly what you're doing. When you rubber stamp it and say, well, they said it was not sustained, well, we don't have enough information, so we're gonna agree with comment or disagree with comment, I think you have to look at it. And maybe it's that you send it back and until you get the information, you don't decide that case at all. Maybe that's what you do. I think that the tragedy, commissioners, the tragedy is that people may have valid discrimination complaints that are coming before you, and because you don't have the information, those complaints are just passing you by. Or you're going along with whatever IA is saying, or you're saying, you know what, we're gonna agree with comment. Maybe you don't, maybe you come up with a non-finding. Maybe there's one other factor, or maybe there's one other category that you can indicate or you can reference that, you know what, we don't have the information we need to make on the determination relative to this discrimination complaint, so we're not going to find anything. That actually would be better, commissioners, than for you to say, we agreed, and then when these finding letters go back to a complainant who believes they have a valid complaint of discrimination, and they find out the commission agreed with comment, that doesn't do anything about it.
Okay, so we can say that the department has not done a thorough investigation, and therefore we are not going to make a decision there. and then
I would do
document that in our reports?
I tell you what, Commissioners, look, you all decide this issue. If it were me, if I were a commissioner and I didn't have the information to make the determination of prejudice or discrimination one way or another, I would not find anything. I plead, for the lawyers, I plead no contest, no law. That's what I would do. I'd have a no finding category if I don't have the information to make it.
Would it be better to say no finding because the investigation was not thorough?
Yes,
Can we say that in the letter to the complaint?
yes. I mean, look, you all can disagree with me. I mean, I'm not a commissioner, so right, you all get to make this call, but I'm telling you that if you think about, ask yourself how satisfied you are as a commissioner when you have complaints that are coming before you, if you don't even have the basis for knowing why this person was stopped and the person is complaining of discrimination. How satisfied are you when the internal affairs investigation comes back and says, not sustained or unfounded, I guess that's what it's going to be. Are you comfortable, commissioners, I ask you because you have to make this call. Are you comfortable with saying, we agree with IA with comment? Are you comfortable with saying that? Or are you more comfortable with saying disagree? And if you're not sure, then maybe you go with another category that, we don't have information here to make this determination one way or another. Just a thought.
The charter said they have to provide all the evidence.
Against them, commissioners? Are you saying, is that, so preponderance of the evidence, commissioners, is just slightly more evidence for than against, right? And so how you all decide that, I mean, it puts you in a quagmire, and I just want to clarify one thing, and Mr. Parker is correct. The ordinance doesn't give you the option to make the finding that I'm saying. I still say you should make the finding, even though the ordinance doesn't say it. I just say you make the finding. But Commissioner, I want to understand exactly what you're asking. You're saying that if they don't give you.
So, Second Vice Chair.
Can you do the mic, please? I'm sorry.
Second Vice Chair mentioned that he will reach out to the department and ask for additional information, whether it is to talk to the officers or more data, and they will reject it. No, we think the stop was legit, so we're not giving you more information. Why? If it's to support their findings. We're not doing an investigation of the complaint. Technically, we're investigating their investigation of the complaint. So why do they have the ability to say no when their complaint process is the one being investigated?
Well, that's a great question, Commissioner. And, the thing about it, you all are reviewing their processes, right? And if you're not comfortable with what they have set out in these discrimination cases, you don't have to agree with it. You don't have to go along with it. You can disagree with their findings. If they come forward with if you're looking at a discrimination complaint and you don't find a basis to support their findings, you don't have to agree with them. A lot of times, Commissioners, what you'll do, or what the commission will do is, and this is, again, back on you because you all have to make these determinations, right? A lot of times the commissioners will agree with whatever their finding is and then have comment. But if you don't believe that they have made the case, or if you believe that there's something there that indicates to you that there's discrimination and you're looking at the totality of the circumstances, you don't have to agree with their findings, is what I'm saying. I just think, I think it's such a disservice, in my estimation, to confirm the department in error if that's what you find. A lot of, all these discrimination complaints are not valid. All right, we know that, right? We know that every complaint of discrimination that you get is not valid. But I tell you what, there are some suspect ones. And you know what those complaints are. And when you see those suspect complaints, commissioners, all I'm saying is you have to dig deep into it. And if you don't have the information that you need to make a determination, maybe there's another category, which, you know what, we can't make that finding in this category because we don't have the right information. But we're not going to agree with you, and we're not going to say, oh, this officer found a policy, came up with a policy rationale, and therefore we're going to pass it on.
Commissioner Byer?
Yeah, we have that, we're staring at that issue right now in case 2024-0005, where the IA report was so wrongfully done. They willfully misconstrued the facts. They left out videos. They willfully misconstrued the facts. They left out videos. They left out allegations. The report itself is a malfeasance on its face. So I followed the protocol, went to talk to them about it. The officer who signed off on the report took my call. We arranged a time to meet. Within an hour, I got an email from him saying his command told him he wouldn't meet with me if I had any questions to submit them in writing. So they're stonewalling us. So my question then, of course, is what's our next step? Tough one, huh?
It's tough. It is tough. It is tough, Commissioners. I don't know if that's for me. When that case comes into closed session, you all be able to discuss it.
Right.
A little in greater detail.
It's a January 1, 2024 incident, so the clock is ticking. It's right there. We don't have a competent report to comment on, so all we're going to be able to say is this report is incompetent, but the statute is going to expire.
Yeah, I know, Commissioners. I think, just like I say, I think that you all should really think, and I hope people don't think I'm not trying to contravene in San Diego law, but if you can't decide on a case because a report is insufficient, I don't see anything that makes you have to force a decision if you can't make the decision because the report is insufficient. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, we have, coming up, just so you know, Commissioner Chatsky, Flores, Lawton, Harvey, and Robinson. And we do have about 15 minutes, and then Commissioner Diaz. So we are now with Commissioner Chatsky.
With respect to discrimination and it being complaint-driven, I'm thinking of the U.S. Supreme Court case, Brown versus Board of Education, where it was a separate but equal facilities for the education of children. And the measure they used was dolls. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, black children were asked which race of doll would you prefer? And they said, well, white. And what I'm getting at here is if we're just sticking to complaint-driven, we also have a standard of subjective versus objective. Did somebody actually feel discriminated against, the subjective, or, well, what is society's role in this? Should they allow this objective discrimination to continue? An education system that teaches black children not to object to discrimination. Anyhow, what I'm wondering, so I'd state it as, I think we need to kind of look at unusual means of testing, dolls or whatever, look at means of trying to determination of what's really going on with respect to discrimination.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now we have Commissioner Flores.
So I'm interested in the difference between overt racism and covert racism within our department. There's instances that are, they're very clearly racist, and then there's ones that are covert, which are microaggressions, which are, ways that we treat people without them really even realizing that, You know, they're just being treated differently. Like when you approach someone who is Latino, you say, "Oh, are you in a gang? Do you have warrants?" And that's the first thing you say to them when you see them. That's the reality we see in our case reviews, which is unfortunate. But the other part of it is that the representation isn't there. When we look at the leadership for SCPD, there are no Latino people, there are no Latinas, there are no people from our community, given that we're next to the busiest border in the world, with 30%, 40% of this city speak Spanish, is from that community. To have representation means that some of those policies might support the inclusiveness of that diverse community. And that's something to look at. And when those policies are ignored because simply people don't know they should change because they're not being seen by the people at the top, then they just keep going. And we have to really make sure that that representation is there because it perpetuates this culture of ignorance that leads to covert racism. And at some point, we'll turn into overt racism. And so that's just the culture we're creating. We're allowing for this culture to stay the way it is if we don't acknowledge that there is racism within this department. And the data speaks for itself. I mean, Harvard did a study with 100 million points of data, 300,000 of which are from San Diego over the past, 5, 6 years. That data clearly says that black and brown people are getting treated differently, not good. And you can see that. So it's hard to say that this department isn't racist when the data speaks for itself and when their own staff members are filing discrimination lawsuits against them. And those are coming up as, yes, they are racist. So it's hard for me as a citizen to believe that they aren't. And so I'd like to hear the argument against that, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Flores. Did you want to?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Commissioner Lawton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this opportunity to address you. I'm new to the commission. I do wish to address pretext stops about which we met at the George Stevens Senior Center on August 7th and the case involving a supposed pretext stop during our last meeting on September 14th. That case involved the stop of a motorist with a non-functioning taillight or similar equipment infraction. The officer had made a U-turn before stopping him. The citizen was in a hurry and upset at being pulled over. He received a citation for the infraction and was sent on his way. Afterward, he made a complaint. The case made its way to Internal Affairs and from there to us. And on September 14, we voted to declare that stop essentially discriminatory and send the case back to IA for further proceedings. In a body whose charge it is to review, evaluate, and investigate, I found myself...
Commissioner Lawton, I need to stop you. We can't talk about cases in open session.
Okay.
I'm going to, that's too specific. Thank you.
All right, well, I haven't mentioned any names, and I won't be doing that. But before I move on, I will say that I was disappointed to hear the incident quickly categorized as a discriminatory event with next to no discussion of the objective facts of the incident. And to me, it was little wonder that an overwhelming majority of our commissioners followed what they were told and voted as they were told. Our duty is to the community, but we have other duties as well, as I see them, and one is to be fair to all concerned, including men and women who serve in the police department. If our officers feel that every time they pull over a motorist for an equipment issue, they will risk an internal affairs investigation or an accusation of discrimination by this commission, some will look the other way at equipment violations so as to avoid the investigation and accusation. I cannot believe that that would be a good thing for anyone concerned, especially motorists and pedestrians. I know there are many in our community who feel that the weight of pretext stops falls more heavily on people of color in the Southeastern Division and other places. The Chief of Police, Scott Wall, addressed us in person on August 7th and candidly acknowledged it is a problem. Do we solve this problem by rushing to judgment on every case involving a stop of a motorist of color for an equipment infraction, even absent any evidence of discrimination, or being seen as a kangaroo court. I say not only do we not solve it, we make it worse by losing credibility with the department. We should want to be taken seriously and as a credible actor by the community, but also by SDPD. If we lose credibility with either one because we are seen as biased or having some kind of agenda other than the one the voters gave us, then we will not be effective as a commission, and we will defeat our own purpose. Losing credibility with citizens means citizens will tune us out. Losing credibility with the department means it will tune us out. Do we want more stonewalling, as Mr. Byer has encountered? What is the reason for that stonewalling? I have little doubt we have lost some credibility already. On August 7th, I watched as citizens addressed the chief during public comment. The chief spoke respectfully and listened. I wish the same could be said of the last speaker, who ended his remarks by calling the chief a pig and the scum of the earth. I was appalled at those words, but not nearly as appalled as I was when the commissioner sitting next to me broke out in applause on hearing them. We have important work to do. I hope to do it to the best of my ability and in an impartial and objective way, letting the hard facts, and only the hard facts, and Ms. Maxwell spoke to us earlier about the importance of the facts, guide us when it comes to case review. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Commissioner Harvey. Thank you, Commissioner Robinson.
Going all the way back to where we started on missing information with attorneys, professionals, and I'm not sure where the complaint sits as far as being private or public, but is there a possibility so we can get the information, like a Freedom of Information Act of some sort?
Actually, the charter gives us a right to get all the information from the police department. And I think that's what Mr. Parker was going to be working on when it comes to IA and how the complaints are handled. Mr. Parker, did you want to add anything?
I think what I can really add right now is some of the topics or some of the things that brought up of Mr. Bennett, if I may. As you know, we have these we know what the code says, and this is the issue right now, right? We have a code, right? But we have to go through the meet and, so what's happening right now, and the folks who are on the CRB can correct me if I'm wrong, but really what we're doing right now is exactly what the CRB did. I mean, that's really all we have the authority to do. We cannot do our independent investigations right now as we were mandated, as the voters want us to do. We must go through the meet and confer. To that point, one of the operating procedures that we're going to talk about is case review. It's a draft right now. It's a draft. So we can sit, for me, I don't want to say it, but right now we haven't gone through meet and confer to talk about even these other options, right? Our code says these are 4 findings. But if you folks want to go through and add to the operating procedures another finding, or you want to clarify what IA's process is, because that's in the operating procedure draft, which is currently not the way it is. We have to change it anyway based on recent conversations that we've had with the new captain and whatnot. That's an opportunity perhaps to address some of the concerns as we move forward with this meet and confer process, if I'm not out of line by saying so. But I think that's the only thing we can do right now. Mr. Bennett.
No, I hear you on that, Mr. Parker. And can I just say 2 things? First of all, Commissioner Lawton, thank you very much. Because okay, so this is the type, Commissioner, this is the type of real discussion you all need to have. Because Commissioner Lawton has an opinion, and some of you have alternate opinions. This is probably, and Commissioner Flores, thank you so much. This is the real stuff that needs to take place so that you can get at this issue. You have one perspective. Commissioner Flores has a perspective. Mr. Robinson, Commissioner Rodriguez, you all have different perspectives. All of them are necessary to bear down on this issue. The one thing I can say is from you know, I can't think of the case Commissioner Lawton is talking about in terms of, yeah, maybe I probably wasn't listening as carefully as I should have on that particular case. But rush to judgment is no good, but also the opposite perspective, which is what I've seen more times, far more times than often, is where the commissioners pass these cases by. You know, they just go by, And maybe it's because you're not getting the information that you need, but again, a lot of the information at the outset is what the Internal Affairs owes you. They're not giving it to you. It doesn't matter what the ordinance says. The ordinance says you're supposed to get it, you still don't get it. And then in some cases, there is, from their standpoint, plausible deniability. You know, from the standpoint of whether or not there's something here that is the basis of why you stopped this officer or why this officer stopped this particular person, this black or brown person. Was it really the car they were driving? Was it really the tinted windows, or was it just because? You know, what was it? If you don't have that vein of information, commissioners, you're not going to be able to get to this issue of discriminatory stops or pretext stops or discrimination stops. And every stop of a black and brown person is not illegal pretext stop. Okay, every complaint of racism or discrimination is not valid. And you know, people, and Commissioner Flores is right. I mean, from the standpoint, look, we'll agree to disagree in terms of the department being racist. I mean, when you think about racism, that's an institutionalized, systematic power dynamic. Okay, so we can agree or disagree on that, right? But there are people who discriminate. And within the police department, San Diego Police Department, some of us have talked to people at high-ranking levels of the police department who are people of color who claim discrimination within the department. They work for the department. I don't know. I'm just listening to what they're saying. And some of you commissioners have talked to those people. You know who you are. So you know that when we say that there is an issue, nobody's making this stuff up. So how it plays out to the public is important. You just can't pass it by, but you also can't rubber stamp it. Okay, that's all I'm saying. I just think that you have to discern it from the totality of the circumstances.
All right, we do have one more commissioner. Did you want to, go ahead.
If I may just jump the gun here for a second. One of the things that did go through Meet and Confer are interim standard operating procedures. And to Mr. Bennett's point, I want to read this here. In the event, for case review, in the event that the commission considers every possible finding and is unsuccessful in reaching the required majority vote to indicate a position on one or more findings, the commission may close the case by a vote of the commission as a failure to achieve consensus. So that's an option as well, just so you folks are aware. Back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Commissioner Diaz?
I just had a really quick question about the investigatory powers of the commission. I think it's probably Mr. Parker might be able to answer this. When we do get our own investigator, will that make the process better of case review and help us to make decisions about discrimination and what have you? Would that make it a lot easier?
What I can say is once we have independent investigatory authority and we investigate these things, your investigators will be asking asking questions to try to get to the bottom of whether or not there's discrimination or not. We will be asking those questions. So I've heard that sometimes maybe IA would say, well, we're not going to ask that question or whatever. We will ask the questions in our independent investigations, and we will bring forward recommended findings to you folks based on our independent investigation that will address. We know, let's be honest, what's the number one concern facing this commission and the police and the community right now? This is it, right? So that's obviously where our focus is going to be, to provide you folks as much possible information so you can make an informed decision based on preponderance of evidence, however we can do that.
And will we be hiring one soon?
It's actually not about the hiring. Yes, we have 2 coming on board. It's when we get the procedures to do the investigations through Meet and Confer. So even if we hire investigators, we still can't do the investigation until the investigation process. Goes to the city, meet and confer, and then the city council. Once those are approved, then we can do it. And that's what the ad hoc operating committee did. So those are the procedures that Mr. Parker was talking about.
Does that include subpoena powers too?
Yes.
Okay.
Great questions. Commissioner Hilpert, and then we're going to wrap, and then Commissioner Justice, and then we're going to wrap it up to go to case review, guys.
Just to add something really quickly, in my experience of reviewing cases, and especially discrimination cases, there have been a case where I felt it was discrimination, but we couldn't prove it. And when I actually talked with Lieutenant IA, he even says, I think you're probably right, but it was one of those things where it couldn't be sustained. And regionally, the department always said, well, the first time an officer has a sustained discrimination finding, they will be fired. Well, we've since found out that's not true. I mean, obviously, with all the disclosure laws that have passed in the last year, we've seen several cases of discrimination that have gone sustained, that are not fired. We've untruthfulness in the discipline matrix. It says the first time that happens, they're supposed to be fired. We've found that's not true. So I think in the past, we had very high bar for discrimination because if there was some error, obviously you didn't want to fire someone for the wrong reason. But we're also finding they're not even following the rules that they have. And so I think that's part of the problem. And I think that's why when we look at these cases, especially nowadays, we do look at it, I think, with a critical eye. And I think that's why we have those very robust conversations. And I think that's healthy, and I think it's what we're supposed to do. So I don't know. I would like to also see the discipline matrix actually have discrimination in there because it doesn't even list it in there. So it makes it a little bit more complicated.
Commissioner Justice, and then we're wrapping it up.
So getting back to where this all started, so we have 4 categories of comments: unfounded, exonerated, sustained, and not sustained. I would move that we add a 5th comment that we were speaking about earlier when we don't have enough information to comment. I'm not sure what we should call it, though. Maybe undecided.
We can't add it right now. I'm going to have.
Better terminology.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Justice, since I created this quagmire for you all, we will be meeting with the city tomorrow, starting tomorrow. And this is something that we will discuss. I mean, look, from a practical standpoint, nobody, including the city, can make you decide one way or another if you can't decide. Right? If you can't decide, if you don't have enough information, you got to pick one side or another. I don't know how the city can make you do that. So that's something that we will discuss, and we'll bring it back to you all to see, how that plays out with the city. We'll be meeting with the city tomorrow.
Just be aware, when they meet with the city and get the updated operating procedures, they will bring them back to the commission. The commission needs to vote on them again. So this group is the final say. Mr. Parker, we have one online comment we're going to give a shot to.
Well, we're going to try. Let's see. Darwin Fishman. Ms. Condi, do you mind? I don't have the ability.
Yeah, no problem. Darwin, I'm allowing you to speak. You can unmute.
Good evening, thank you.
Oh,
Darwin.
we can hear, but it's low. Sorry, Darwin, 1 second.
It's okay.
It's just low.
Slow?
Yeah, you can hear him, but it's low.
Sounds loud in here. Turn it up.
Okay, can you go ahead and speak again?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. I just wanted to add earlier discussion, since I was on the CRB, based on my experience, I did want to throw out, because I don't think this has really been mentioned yet, there is RIPA and there's RIPA data, and that's public information. And I think as someone that's actually personally worked with Brandon on cases in dealing with discrimination, I do think that there are ways that we can improve CPP, that you can improve the way that you investigate it. And I think one of the ways is finding directly or indirectly access to RIPA data. Indirectly would be having the police use it so that they can see if officer, for example, has a high percentage of pulling over particular race or racial minorities, then they can set up their own internal mechanism for addressing that. And that's a reasonable request for them to look at and include RIPA data and how they discipline officers and review them. The other part I just wanted to share, because I don't think this was clearly stated, when I was on the CRB and I asked about discrimination and specifically about racism, I was steered towards courtesy violation. And I was actually told that, for example, there wasn't a specific category for racism. And so I think that's actually a huge deal, because when I was a part of investigations, it was clear that there is different level of cultural competency and understanding with at that time with my fellow CRB members about what constitutes as racism. And so certain things like hand gestures or comments for us in the Black community is definitely considered racist. And that needs to be part of the education for everyone, I believe now in CPP. And so that you have a similar foundation coming from when someone files a complaint about racism, understanding why they felt like they were discriminated against and what those circumstances are. And I don't know, again, when I was on this CRB, quite often there were not people that were explaining this and providing that information that's really critical for understanding why it is considered a racist action. So I just wanted to share that, because that's a critical part about evidence, is that cultural understanding and cultural competency. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Frischman. And to be clear, in response to that, when we get independent investigatory authority, one of the things that Mr. Burgess and I have already talked about, there has to be a way to have that objective criteria that was mentioned earlier by looking at data, whatever data exists. You can't tell me that data doesn't exist. You should be able to look at what an officer is patrolling and their activities when they're patrolling a certain area compared to other officers patrolling the same areas during the same times to see if there's any data that could be pulled. So when we have our independent investigatory authority, we'll do the best we can to get that information as we move forward. Now, as far as case review, it's going to be up to the department to give us information. That's where we stand.
Thank you. Is it quick? Okay, Commissioner Flores.
So, turn down. Can you hear me? Okay. Sorry, guys. So I was just wondering if me and Paul, we were talking about the Computational Policy Lab and how Harvard and Stanford were using that. And they have a model of how they make, policy decisions based off of all of this data that's collected from all over the U.S., from, open Freedom of Information Acts that they then take and they place into their algorithm. They figure out how to create a database, and they're able to make these decisions with the help of, policymakers around the nation. So to have something like that here would be very beneficial to not only us, but also, knowing this is a top tourist destination, knowing this is also next to the biggest border in the world, like I said before, it's very much, something we should look at. And we're looking at that, to be able to understand really what we can do within this, but we need to know that that is even a possibility and that, it's an idea, right? So.
Will Mr. Parker and Mr. Burgess look into it and get back to us? Thank you. That's a good idea. You know what, we have to cut off comments. I'm sorry. Because you know what, the reason is we have case review, guys. And so I just want to Mr. Bennett for his presentation, but I also want to thank the commissioners for their honesty, for speaking from the heart. What Mr. Bennett said about different opinions, that's what makes our commission so, in my opinion, special, because we come from different backgrounds, we come from different places, and we want this to be a safe space for all commissioners. So that's why we insist on respect. And you may not like what another commissioner says, but they may not like what you say. So if it's treated with respect, that's where we can gain at least some sort of consensus, move forward, and really make a difference. So I appreciate everyone's opinions and everyone being willing to speak today, and also everyone being willing to be respectful to their fellow commissioners. So thank you. We are now moving into, closed session. Before we do that, are there any public comments for closed session?
I don't believe so.
All right, I'm turning it over to Mr. Bennett to lead us into closed session.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Chair. There'll be a recommended closed session under Government Code Section 54-957 to discuss complaints that are confidential under Penal Code Sections 832.5 through 832.8. That would be the recommendation.
All right, I'm sorry. We would like to ask all members of the public and/or audiovisual and to leave. This is now closed session. Unless you've signed a confidentiality agreement and are part of the commission, I'm sorry, I have to ask you to leave. All right, we are coming out of closed session, and so we turn it to our counsel, Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. The commission met in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54-957. There is no reportable action. That concludes my report.
37. Thank you and have a great evening.